everybody, it's me, Jackie G. Welcome to another Art Talk Tuesday. So glad to be with you all again. For those of you that don't know, 50 years, we're located in one of the most beautiful cities, downtown Toronto. I'm so glad that you're deciding to join us today. This is a special treat, and I always look forward to it. Our guest today is going to be Jimmy Leslie, who works with Colart and is an Uber, he's one of the coolest guys I know in our industry and knows absolutely everything about art materials and product. Today's topic is going to be about Liquitex acrylic mediums. So if you do have any questions, we already have a few that were sent in. If you do have any questions, get them ready. I'm sure Jimmy will take some time to answer them as well. You know that he's just going to have a lot to talk about. A few things that I wanted to tell you before Jimmy does join us, and I will mention it again during the show, or during our chat and live at least. We do have a sale on right now. It starts today on all Liquitex products. That's going to be on for the whole month, actually. It ends the beginning of March. So that's 15% off all Liquitex products. On the February the 27th, we're going to have another Art Talk Tuesday, which is going to be a Zoom demo with Liquitex. And so if you want to sign up for that, that is on Eventbrite. You can go to our website, check it out. Hello, Jimmy.
Hi, Jackie.
I'm just giving them the lowdown on everything we're going to be doing.
Awesome.
And so that's February 27th. Sign up for a Zoom demo, which will be using all of the product. We've already spoken with Alice, and she's getting all kinds of things ready for us. As well, on March the 1st, if you're in Toronto, and of course, I always say we'd love to see everyone, drop by. It's called an open table, and we're going to have set up all kinds of Liquitex mediums, and you can come in and play. So you'll be able to test them out, see what you like. And we won't be answering as many questions, so today's an opportunity, and so will be when we have our Zoom demo with Alice. But we'll have enough product on display that you'll be able to come in and play for it and talk to our staff, and they'll share whatever knowledge they have. But you have two opportunities before then to learn everything that you think you want to know about Liquitex mediums. So those are 3 dates that I've already given out. February the 27th for our Zoom demo, and well, our sale, which is on for the whole month, and of course March the 1st, which is the open table. Now, again, today I always like I said before, one of the coolest guys I know in our industry. You know, I was going to say, Jimmy, I didn't wear the sweatshirt with the hoodie today, but that was a really great picture.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So, you know what? I always love chatting with you about art materials in general. Your knowledge is, you just make it all seem so effortless and easy. And I think that's great for anyone who's watching. Can certainly always, I always learn something. There's always some tip that I didn't know, and I can't say that I think I know everything, but it's amazing on the little things that always pop up that, you know, either I don't know, or I'm sure a lot of our viewers don't know. We do have a few questions that came in early, and as I mentioned to a lot of people, please get your questions ready. We'll try and answer them. Someone's going to be watching and typing to see if they can, and I'm sure Jimmy will be watching as well. I'm not going to take the time from Jimmy because I want him to get started so I can ask more questions. So we're going to talk about Liquitex mediums, everything we want to know, how to use them, how to mix them. And I'm going to give the floor to you, Jimmy, and I look forward to piping in once in a while.
Awesome, Jackie. Thank you. I joined and I heard you say all these flattering things, and I'm like, oh, she's talking about me. I think my face got all red. So thank you for that.
It's all true.
Well, it's very kind to you, and I love these chats as well. I think for all you guys tuning in, and I know whenever I say tune in on a digital platform like this, I sound like I'm from the 1940s. But nonetheless, when you join or log on or however you want to say it, Jackie and I have these conversations and they're sort of organic. And I think that we will likely answer questions maybe before you even answer them, because that's just the nature of how a little art talk like this goes. But let me set it up for you a little bit kind of in my head. When Jackie said, hey, you want to come on and talk about mediums? It's a really fun topic, but I was thinking, how do I want to arrange this in my head, which I think is the clearest way to help all you understand everything. Now, we're not going to look at the whole Liquitex range. There is something like, oh my gosh, 40 or more different products in the Liquitex range. So in the time that we have today, there's no way we could cover it all. So we're going to kind of look at different categories of them. But here's how I want you to kind of think about things, everybody. A medium is basically something that you add to your paint to change its inherent characteristics. And that might be for your own aesthetic choices. Maybe you're influenced by a certain artist that you see and you're like, oh, I want to be able to do that, but my material doesn't currently let me do that. How can I add something to it? So that's what we talk about when we're talking about mediums, and I'll explain how we can alter the characteristics. But when we say mediums over on the Liquitex side of things, we're also including gesso, our gesso category, which is what you would use to prepare a surface. And we're also including varnish on the other end of it to protect your paintings and so. But let's start with the mediums themselves. I'm going to go to my work surface now and kind of flip things around here. And of course, Jackie, just kind of jump in anytime you want to, you see a question there. But here's how I want to start this out for everybody. I'm looking at a few different ranges that we have in Liquitex in terms of color. So we've got acrylic ink, very, very, very fluid. We then have soft body, which is more what we would call sort of a medium viscosity. So not fluid, but not super thick paint. We have acrylic gouache, so somewhat similar in its feel to to soft body, except this is going to give you some gouache-like properties, meaning it's going to dry very matte and very opaque. And then we've got our old standby here, heavy body, so a very thick viscosity, and our newest range of acrylics, bio-based, and you can see I've been using that one, bio-based heavy acrylics. And I'll explain what bio-based means as we get into it, but let's just take a look at these. So if we put out a little ink, and I'm just gonna, let's see if I can, yeah, there we go. I'm gonna put out a little ink and you can see just how fluid that is. So if I move everything off my palette here, and I can sort of move that around very easily, right? Super, super fluid. And so if you were somebody and we were hanging out and you said, hey, Jimmy, you know, what should I choose out of these things that you just showed me? I would say, well, if you're somebody who likes ink-like properties, you like to draw with ink, you want a very fluid paint, I would choose this because it's our most fluid acrylic. But let's just say you say, well, this is great. I do want to do that, Jimmy, but sometimes I want to make it thicker. That's where we get our gel mediums come into play. So I'm going to do this. I always like thinking about this like mashed potatoes, if you'll bear with me for a second. And what I mean by that, so I'm going to imagine like, you know, we're having our Thanksgiving feast. Whether you're over here in the States or you're up in Canada, we both share Thanksgiving, which is really cool and a fun time to kind of overdo it a little bit with our eating. So imagine we've got some mashed potatoes, and I'm going to reach here and imagine this is sort of my gravy that I might put in the middle here, my acrylic ink. Now I can take my palette knife, and what I can do is mix that. And what I've essentially done is I've made a much thicker paint. And this is more similar or closer to our heavy body right out of the tube, which is thicker. Not quite that thick, but it's approaching that. So it gives us the ability to change the qualities of that. And let's just say, though, again, we step back a second and you said to me, hey, Jimmy, I'm not sure which one of these I want to use, these different paint ranges. And maybe I said to you again, well, what do you like to do? And instead of ink, maybe you said, I really like thick applications of paint. But sometimes I like to get thinner like that. That's kind of neat. Do I have to buy a whole other range? And I'd say, oh gosh, no, absolutely not. So here's where we would take our fluid medium. So I'm going to be quiet and we're going to hear this. Should be able to, I hope you can hear that. So very, very fluid. And I'm going to take some of that. And you can see here, this is not quite, I'm going to clean off my palette knife a little bit better. I'm going to take some of our heavy body and mix it in there. And you can see already I'm making that a much more fluid paint. I could add much more to get it even thinner. I'm not ink-like consistency there, but I've taken this very fluid viscosity, gotten very thick, taken this very thick viscosity and gotten much thinner. And when I'm doing something like that, what I like to think about is I kind of refer to these few mediums I'm going to explain to you as sort of the workhorses of the mediums range. So there's a matte fluid medium, there's a gloss fluid medium, and then in the middle, there's a satin fluid medium. Then on the gel side, there's also a matte gel, a gloss gel, and some other varieties of gloss gel, which we'll get into, and a matte gel. So I look at that and I think those are, generally speaking, the starting point for most artists. They want to make something thinner, or they want to make something thicker, and they want to make something more matte, or they want to make something more gloss. And that's why I refer to those as the workhorses. So if you're somebody watching this right now and you're thinking, you know, yeah, I'd like to start using mediums, where do I begin? Those would be sort of my 6 choices. But I want to step back, and then we'll see if we have some questions. I want to step back a bit further, because you might say to me, well, is it necessary that I even use a medium? Because, I mean, it's acrylics, right? So a lot of people, I'm not going to assume anything about everybody viewing, but a lot of you probably know acrylics are water-based. So why not just add water if I want to thin it? Why add that medium? So let's go back down to my work surface here again. And if we take a look at this, I'm going to show you this little kind of demo board I have here. I'm going to actually flip it and do it this way. This is, I believe this is ultramarine blue. And I thinned it with a great deal of water. And you can really see how it's sort of broken up here. It's kind of dull. And here I've used the gloss medium. Now we have a sheen. It's much more saturated, and we don't have this uneven sort of broken paint that's happening right there. And why is that important? Well, it's important because a lot of times, if you think about cleaning off a brush, what do? We swish that around in water a lot. You know, well, hopefully on your brush, use the paint, right? Use as much as you can. Wipe off the excess so we don't make a whole lot of waste. But there's going to be a point where you want to thin the, you know, you want to clean the brush. So you're swishing that around in water, and you can break that up. And what I find is that a lot of people who are getting into acrylics for the first time don't know about mediums. So they tend to over thin their paint, and then they have complaints and they say, I don't know, it's looking kind of dull. It looks like the color's sunk into the surface. I don't like acrylics. Or acrylics look sort of plastic, like, well, they are the plastic family, but they look exceptionally plastic. I don't like that look. I don't like acrylics. And I don't think it's that they don't like acrylics. I think it's that they don't know how to manipulate them in such a way to get the desired effects. Jackie, am I ringing any bells? And does that raise any questions for you or any that we have in the chat? Because if so, fire away.
I don't see anything in the chat yet, but I do have a question for you, just because of when you were mixing, a couple things came to mind that someone might wonder. When you add the medium to the ink or to the acrylic, does it change the color?
That's a great, yeah, that's a smart question. Yes, to a degree, and it depends. So I always hate doing that, because I like giving yes or no answers, but there's nuance, right? It's art, and it's art material. So yes and no. When you add something to the paint, you know, anything, any one of these mediums, yes, you can do a number of things. You can make the color more opaque. You can make the color more transparent. Let's go back down to my work surface now, and let me show you. I'm going to need my glasses here for this. And let's take this. Let's take this satin medium that I used. We're going to look at this right here, this little square, and we're going to see, that means transparency. The fact that that is just a square with nothing inside of it. And I can, let me take another medium. I'm going to grab modeling paste. So modeling paste here has that black square. That tells me, okay, that's going to make my color more opaque. And it depends on how much of a medium we add to a product, how much it's going to affect the color. So for instance, let's just take another medium here. I'm going to reach over here. This is iridescent medium. So I want to show you just a few color things here. When I say color, color as in the labels here. So when we're looking at our fluid mediums, they're going to have this green label. Now, some of you folks, if you're a Liquitex user, you might see this right here. This label, that's a fluid medium. We see that. This is old label here. This too is a fluid medium. It says it on here, just not with the F. And we've kind of pumped up the color there to be a little bit brighter. So your fluid mediums, when you look at, on the Gwartzman site, or you go into store, you're going to see in new product, you're going to see it's going to have that green label. If we're looking at our gel medium, they're going to have this more red label. The old one would have sort of red, but maybe more crimson here. It's going to be a sort of a darker. So you're going to have that. So that's going to let you know we're looking at gel. Our gessos are going to have this blue label here. The original one, again, would be darker, or the former one, I should say. And then iridescent medium, which I just had in my hand right here, is going to have this silver label. And that's going to be our effects mediums. So the reason I wanted to bring this one out is I'm going to put some iridescent medium, and I'm going to move that. I'm going to put some on my surface right here. Oh, I got pretty liberal. That's a guy who works for the company there, Jackie. I got a little liberal there, but you can see that beautiful iridescent quality to it.
Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to tint a color with that, what I would suggest is that we grab, this is quinacridone crimson in the bio-based heavy acrylics. This is a transparent color. It actually says it right there, in addition to the little, again, square. And I'm just going to take a tiny bit of that. If I use a very opaque color, it's going to overpower the iridescent qualities in there. So I'm just going to take a little bit. I'm going to mix that in. And I can mix more. I'm just taking a little bit first. I always kind of, well, I should say actually in my own practice in life, I don't necessarily err on the side of caution all the time. But here, I'm just kind of being a little bit more conservative with how much I put in there. And I want to show you that a little bit closer now. It's just got this, it's got a gorgeous, look at, that, when you do that, got this gorgeous shimmery, makes me think of maybe some fancy sports car, that's got a really beautiful metallic finish to it. And that can be quite gorgeous. So yes, in a case like that, that's going to change the color a tremendous amount, because I'm only using a little bit, because what I really want to pop through is that iridescent quality more so than the color itself.
Right.
Yeah. So quite fun. Oh, yeah. Oh, so while we're here, and then we'll see about other questions and things that I maybe triggered for you, Jackie. While I have this in my hand, this is our new bio-based heavy acrylic. So what this really means in a nutshell, and that was kind of a big nutshell, there's a lot to say about this product, but it's an acrylic that is using renewable sources. So instead of an acrylic like any one of our other ranges, let's say the heavy body range, acrylics come from petroleum-based sources. So this is now an average of 50% bio-based, which means it'll come from things like algae, food waste, corn, soy, and so on. And if we look at this, it'll actually say here, this is 43% bio-based. Some of the colors will say 50, some will say 53, 54. And the reason, and I'll just, because I'm talking to you here, I'm going to flip back here. The reason why you might have different percentages for some of those is that if you have a pigment that is organic, right? So it's carbon based, that's going to jump that level up a little bit higher. If you have something that is something like an ochre or an umber or something that was never living, was never carbon based, that's going to lower that level of our bio-based heavy acrylic in there. So if you're looking to make a shift with sustainable products, you can buy one of the mediums and you can add it to any of the existing Liquitex ranges.
Hmm.
Or you can buy any of the bio-based heavy acrylics and you can add that to your existing mediums that you have. So there's a good crossover there. Question, Shaki, and anything that before we move on?
I had actually something else that I wrote down, and since you had poured so liberally your
Yeah.
pearl medium, is there ever a time when you can add too much medium to your paint?
Too much medium. Well, so okay. So the great thing about mediums and acrylics in general, they're pretty tough to break. Meaning, what I mean by that is you can add. We could take one drop of any bit of the color we had and add that to an entire jar of whatever it is, the gel medium, the modeling paste, and nothing technically would be wrong with that. There would be nothing that would cause an issue with the paint. Kind of doesn't make sense that we'd add just one drop of color to an entire jar like that. So that's an extreme thing. There are a few cases though. So we have certain products, just a few of them that we would call, and I don't have any here at the moment, but that we would call additives.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be something like a flow aid. That's a medium that is designed to get your acrylics to act more like watercolor. So flow aid, it's to get them to flow. And that's a concentrated mixture. So it's about, you're going to put about 10% or about 1 part flow aid to 10 parts water. And you don't want to shift those things because it's a concentrated formula. So it would be more if you're on the Gwartzman's website and you see one of them that says additives, those would be the ones where you would have just a few different specifics to that. But generally speaking, 99% of the range, no, you can kind of go as heavy as you want. So let's go back down to our surface here and I'll kind of illustrate that for you. And we'll take, well, let's see, I had my, we have the gel. Oh, you know what? Let's take though, I think I want to take the gloss heavy gel. So I'm going to do that. Just kind of a thicker application here. So I'm going to always make sure your palette knife is clean. We don't want to kind of gunk this all up. I'm going to take a whole lot right here. And, you know, the beauty of a medium, let's get that on there. I'm really slapping this on there like I'm, again, dishing out the mashed potatoes on the lunch line. But you can see here, and I'm going to lift that up so you can kind of see it here.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount right there. So I can add just a tiny bit of color. I can add a lot of color to that. I'm going to take some of the bio-based yellow oxide here, and we'll add that. But here's the thing. You know, when you're using mediums, and we can mix that in, when you're using mediums like this, especially something that will make it this thick, that can be beneficial economically. And what I mean by that, so we can really build that up and get that super peaky. And the reason I say that is because if we were to take that huge volume of color, right? If we wanted to make a really thick painting and we loaded a whole lot of color, that's going to be quite expensive because the pigments are expensive themselves. So when you make an acrylic paint or an oil or a watercolor for that matter, a good portion of the cost of that is in the pigment. So you don't necessarily, you're probably on a budget, you don't want to squeeze out a half a tube. If we're looking at something like our mediums here, this is basically your acrylic resin without the color in it. Right, so it's kind of the paint devoid of the pigment, if you will, and that's kind of putting it in simplistic terms. But that means that's going to be more affordable if you want to thicken up the paint, if you want to bulk it up, and you want to get some of that thickness. So I think a lot of times what happens is, as an artist, you're looking around, and I don't know all your backgrounds today, but I'm guessing you're here because you want some knowledge, and maybe you're playing around with acrylics and you want to learn more. It's a pretty pricey thing to experiment with a whole lot of materials. And I always say it is good to use a chunk of it because I liken it to food. You know, it's very hard to cook and make something, but I only take, you know, that much food. You have to use it to experiment, but that doesn't mean you have to break the bank. So, you know, one of the other things today we're focused on medium, so it's not so much colors, but it might be where you want to use something like one of our introductory range, like basics
Sure.
acrylic, because those are more affordable, a little bit lesser pigment load, still high quality. So you can use those and feel a bit more free to use the paint, because back when I was a college art professor, I'd see students and they would put out these minuscule amounts. And I was very careful about their budgets too, but they would mix up a color and then they'd get something that'd be like, oh, I love this. And then it was gone in one brush stroke. So you gotta play a little bit more. Jackie, I'm gonna kind of clear off my palette here so we can get some more
Sure.
stuff out. And while I'm doing that, you please feel free to fire away with
Sure.
another question.
I don't have any questions
Okay.
coming in just
Okay.
yet.
Yep.
But I do have some that were pre-sent, so I'm
Oh,
going to ask those first.
yeah, please.
So someone wanted to ask the matte versus the ultra matte medium. What's the difference?
Yeah. So the matte has obviously a matte sheen. When you get to the ultra matte medium and that dries, it actually has almost more of an encaustic like feel.
Sure.
And I realize that might be a term that some people don't know. So if you're out there and you're like, the heck are Jimmy and Jackie talking about encaustic? What is that? Encaustic is a wax-based paint, so it can have a very waxy sort of feel. And that can be beautiful. You have to actually mix that on it's almost like a heating plate that you would have, and you're essentially melting colored wax and you're painting with that. Quite an old method of working. And it's beautiful, but there's kind of a lot of stuff that you have to do and equipment, and there's a pretty big learning curve to it. And I got to say, I have very little experience with it myself, but the ultra matte medium will give you a little bit more of that encaustic like feel. So a little bit more of a waxy looking surface to it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. Thank you very much.
sure. Of course.
Someone also asked, and we're still talking about matte mediums,
Yeah.
can you put it on top of charcoal or chalk pastel as a stabilizer?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
So if yeah, that's tricky. So if you have pastel or chalk down and you're putting this matte medium, or even if it was a gloss medium, it doesn't matter,
sure.
satin gloss, any one of those, it's fluid. You're gonna smear those. So I would say that'll be a little bit touchy to do that. You would have to kind of fix that in place first. So if you wanted to, let's say you had your drawing, because you're doing that as you're forming your composition,
Yeah,
and you like to work in charcoal or anything like that that might smudge easily. That's where I'd probably do you could do a light mist of a fixative, and then you could put that to further fix it in place
okay.
with your matte medium and give a ground. And here's the thing too. If now note this, if you have a matte medium or a satin medium, it's essentially the gloss version with matting agents in it. And same thing when we're talking about varnishes. If you have a gloss varnish, your matte and satin varnishes are essentially the gloss varnish that has matting agents in it to knock the sheen down. And with both of those things, whether it's a matte or satin medium or a matte or satin varnish, my suggestion is make sure you have that mixed up. If it's been sitting around for a while, the heavier matting agents can potentially settle. And
Okay.
then you use it, and we've had people call our tech line and they're like, I think there's something wrong with the matte media, or especially more with varnishes. But I think something's wrong with the gloss varnish or the matte varnish. It looks gloss. I think you guys put the wrong one in there. And our first thing is always, did you mix it up? Did you get that homogenized by getting that back in place? Has it been sitting a while? That's generally the situation that occurs.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
So I want to show
Those are
you some. Oh, go ahead, Jackie. Go
no,
ahead.
no, no. I was just going to say there's another question, but I'm sure we're going to be
Okay,
addressing it. So we'll see what
cool.
happens.
So we're going to go back down to the surface here,
Sure.
and I want to show you. I just have this is just a page out of a magazine, and the reason I like this is, to me, one of the unsung heroes is clear gesso. I love this product. Now, I don't do that many mixed media collages anymore. I used to do a lot more. And when I did, I would often collect things like magazine clippings, or it could have been ticket stubs, receipts from travels, and I would make collages. So what I've done is I've covered half of this with our gesso, and you might be able to tell, it's very hard, but you might be able to tell it's a bit more matte over here instead of the shiny the shiny surface that we have on this side. So basically where the text is split. This side, no clear gesso. This side, clear gesso. And again, I'm going to be quiet here and just listen. You don't hear much, if anything. Over here, we hear it, right? So we've added this gritty surface to this. We've added a surface that has some tooth. So if you want to work with something like a pastel pencil or charcoal on like a found object, like a slick surface, let's take this side that has no clear gesso. We make a mark, but it's kind of dull. It doesn't show up real well over the dark areas for sure. Over here, I'm going to go to the light area.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's really, it's able to, that tooth of it, when we say tooth for anybody who doesn't know, the grittiness that it now has will act to pull that pastel off the pencil. And then if we come over here, that's where it really shows. Like I can come here and really lay it on.
Yeah.
And it's just, it can't, you can see it broken down a bit, but it just can't grab that slick surface. So I love this because if you wanted to, work on top of something and draw with pastel and do something else, you can really kind of get into it with that, which I think is pretty exciting.
That is very exciting, but I have some questions because I have not heard that before.
Okay.
So you have your sheet, you have the piece that you showed.
Sure.
And would you layer it down? Would you glue it down to a surface first?
Oh yeah, good question, Jackie. Yeah, you certainly could. I mean, you wouldn't have to, but you certainly probably would. Like, so if I just speak about I wonder if I don't really have any. I'd have to run over to the other side of the studio and start digging for a mixed media collage. But if generally speaking, you're probably gluing those down. And I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, you see, this is how these organic conversations work. You don't need to buy another glue. The beauty of acrylic mediums is that they are these natural adhesives. They're really lovely for holding things in place. So you don't have to think, well, do I need something like there was that product, Gorilla Glue or Super Glue or a rubber cement, and will that play nicely with the acrylics? You don't have to worry about that. Don't buy another product when it comes to that. And the other thing, I'm going to see if I can do, this is going to be a little bit weird, Jackie. So I have a pair of jeans on, and I'm just going to show you and all our viewers here. See the patches on these jeans?
Yeah.
These are old. I've had those jeans for longer than my kids, I think. And I'm not good at sewing. My daughter's away at college, and I had another hole in these jeans. I'm like, how can I keep these things going? And I just kind of wear them in the studio. So I took an old bandana and I used matte medium, and I glued it right on the surface there, and it works. And it's on there, and it really wants to grab. So you can glue down fabric. If you were doing something like that piece of paper we just played with, you could use like a fluid medium. You wouldn't need anything gel-like to hold that in place, right? So I would just use a little bit of that. If you had a heavy object, so let's say you're doing a mixed media collage, and I don't know, it's a coin, it's a whatever, it's something heavy that really needs to get on there. Your fluid medium's obviously not going to do it. It doesn't have the guts and the weight to it. One of our gel mediums or the modeling paste, which we'll get out in a second, those are going to have the body to really hold a heavier object in place and lock it down and glue it down on your surface.
Would a polymer work as well?
Yeah, polymer would work as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I did not know that about, I always like clear gesso, but just seeing that impact that you can do. Now, then once you've put down, let's say you're using pastel or as you did some kind of a coloring pencil, would you then spray it and so you could work on top of that to fix it?
Sure, you could do that. You could use any drawing fixative, and that would be fine. Let's say you got to the end of the whole project though, and you're totally done. And so we'll jump from gesso to the other end of the spectrum. So let me flip our camera again right here. So when you're done with everything, you could varnish. Now we have we have varnishes that are, you know, the fluid varnish that can be brushed on. But again, if we were doing something like this, I would not want to brush a varnish over that.
Right.
Again, I could use the fixative, that'd be fine. Or that's when I might use a spray varnish. So the difference between these here, aside from this being a fluid brushable and this being a spray, this one is gloss varnish and it's water based. It
Right.
just says gloss varnish. There's a satin, there's a matte, there's other varieties of it. This one says Soluvar. It comes in a spray form. It also comes in the brush on form, but this is a solvent based varnish. So if you put this down on your image, and later on you wanted to remove it, you could use a mineral spirits based based solvent, a mineral spirit solvent, to remove this if you wanted to do that. So, but the spray varnish is nice if you have something that is like a really, a thick, like kind of like what we were saying, like a mixed media collage that's got objects and things in it. It's not easy to brush on a varnish.
Right.
It might settle in the hills and valleys, so to speak, and it might just be super hard to apply. That's where a spray varnish could come into play. And if we still have some time after we get to some other ones, I'll touch upon a few other things about varnish, because varnish is its own topic. I mean, it's a big one. It's its own topic. But the gessos, there's a clear gesso, regular gesso, a super heavy gesso. So I'll show you that one real quick here. If you wanted to, let's go back on a lot of flipping back and forth here. If we go down to our surface right here, and I take super heavy gesso, this is going to be quite thick. And you might say, well, yeah, kind of thick like the gel, right? Yes, very much so. But it's got little aggregates in there that give you that rough surface that we just talked about. So if you wanted to put down a super heavy gesso, imagine that you want a lot of texture. Once again, a lot of texture. You can build up that texture and then paint on top of it. Or let's just say you have your ground, whether your ground or surface is watercolor paper, canvas, wood, whatever it is. We could also add some color in to this if we want to tint it as well. We wouldn't want to add a ton of color to this, because by adding too much color here, too much of the acrylic color, will knock back some of the grittiness of this texture here of the super heavy gesso. So I don't know. It's not that there's a hard and fast rule. We could add a whole lot to this, but it's just we'd be kind of knocking back that gritty tooth that we want, so that successive layers can grab it. So I'm just using a little. So if we want to tint a surface, that can be a nice way to do that. Build up texture, and then we can paint on top of it. And with any of our mediums here, we can put the medium down, put color on top of it. We can mix color with the medium. That's usually what we think of when we think of mediums. We think of mixing color in with it. Or we could put color down, and again, we could then put a medium on top of that. If we want to build any which way we want to kind of slice the cake and build the layers, you totally have the freedom to do that. And what I really like about that with acrylics, I was trained first as an oil painter, and I still love oil painting. I love watercolor. I love a lot of. I'm fortunate to do what I get to do because I get to play. But with oil, there's a lot of trickier, sort of more rules that kind of come into play with the drying rates of oils and such, and that can be kind of difficult for people who are just diving into painting. Again, with acrylics, you almost can't break them. They're really, I hate to use a computer term here, but they're pretty user friendly when it comes to that.
Oh, that's good to know. Someone actually asked the question, when you mixed the color into that super heavy gesso,
Yeah.
it lightened it. And so the question would be, will it dry darker or will it stay light?
Yeah, so acrylics, once the water, so yeah, that's a good question. So acrylics, when the water content of the acrylics goes out of that, and this is, let's actually answer it this way, Jackie. This is actually quite good.
Sure.
So when we see something, this isn't the gesso, mind you, right now. The gesso is not going to dry clear. We want that white surface, unless it's the clear gesso. And if I just back up, since we're on that subject again, clear gesso is great for doing what we just did, being able to work with a dry media on top of surfaces. So that's great. Clear gesso is also something you'd want to choose if maybe you want to work on a wood panel, but you want the grain of that wood to show through. Or again, any other surface where you really enjoy the surface and you want that to kind of come through and you want that to be part of the work, that's where clear gesso would be nice. Your regular gesso is something where, generally speaking, you want a white surface. You're trying to use it to temper the absorbency of a surface.
Okay.
So if you can work with your acrylics directly onto an unprimed piece of wood or a watercolor paper. There's nothing technically wrong with that, but they're going to be super absorbent. They're going to draw the color in, and it's going to lack its punch, its saturation. And if it's a glossy paint, or like most of our paints dry to a satin finish, not the acrylic gouache, but the others dry mostly to a satin finish.
Right.
And if you work on an unprimed surface, it's gonna sink in, and it's not gonna have that sheen anymore. And that's where you'll have it looking kind of dull in a situation like that. But when we look at something like this, is the satin gel, it looks really white. That's gonna dry clear though, because when you have the water content in here, it's reflecting light off of it. When that evaporates out of the paint film, that's going to dry clear. So it looks milky, it looks white because of that water content that's in there. Just the way the light refracts off of those water particles in there. So that can be, that's something that comes into play. Sure. I want to show, here's what I want to do. I want to show you something I think is really kind of neat, and I kind of get a little geeky over. And the funny thing is, I don't do this in my work because I don't have a specific reason, but I think it can be fun for a lot of people. So I'm going to come back down to my surface here.
Cool.
And well, actually, I don't do it in my work per se, but I'm going to show you something here. Here it is. This is a raised stencil. So what I did here is I put some acrylic ink down, kind of did it on almost like a tent, like it would be a setting for a table, for a dinner party kind of thing. And then I've monogrammed it, and I started to go with a gold over top of that. But what I used is modeling paste. So let's take a look at this. What I could do, I'm gonna take, I think, let's do this. No. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to take our modeling paste, and I'm going to put this out. And I could do this with the super heavy gesso as well, but I'm going to take out our modeling paste, and that's quite thick. It's going to dry very, very matte. And it's very opaque. So we're going to mix a little color. Again, even though this is our standard mediums, as opposed to the bio-based medium that says bio-based and has the green band on it, I'm going to mix that with some of our bio-based color here. So this happens to be a yellow medium azo. I'm just going to take some of that, and I'm going to mix a little bit of color in. And I'm going to do that so that you can see clearly against a white surface what I'm about to do. I don't need to mix more. I mean, I would if I was working on a project, but for our purpose right here, that's mixed enough. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this off to the side, and I've got just sort of an acrylic paper here. And I'm going to grab this stencil right here. And I'm going to take some of this, really kind of trowel that on there. And I'm just going to pull it over that A. And I can have that raised off the surface. Let's do a few more here so we can kind of see maybe like a whole section. Now, if you were doing this, I would suggest that you tape it down so it doesn't slide and, it doesn't move and such. But again, in what we're doing here and me moving quickly and talking about all this stuff, then I just raise it nice and gently. Yeah.
What a great idea.
Yeah, really kind of funky, huh?
Yeah.
It's really kind of neat. And this is me doing it quickly. So it just depends on how you trowel that on there. But here's another example I'll show you. If I grab it over here, this is, I just kind of took the Liquitex logo. And you can see just how thick I can get with that. And again, if I wanted to mix color with it, that'd be fine. If I wanted to paint over top of it, that would be fine too. But this can be just a lovely way for people to make images that are sort of, I would say, decorative, because not everybody. I think Jackie, and I think you would agree with this just from knowing your customers who come into the store. Not everybody is making a landscape painting or a portrait or doing things like I might want to do. They're not, their goal is not necessarily, I want to make art, or do I want to sell it or show it. They want to do something creative. They want to use, right? They want to, I mean, it's the reason, I don't know, it's the reason we learn languages, right? Or we learn how to knit or to do any other thing or play music. We may never go play in a band somewhere, but there's just something about the human spirit wanting to be creative. And I love the idea that somebody can do this and say, hey, I'm going to have a dinner party. I can get a stencil, and wouldn't it be really kind of cool if I do a little place setting for people? Or just the beauty of the one thing I like to do that definitely gets a bit more crafty and is so different than my work that you see in my studio here. I like to make cards for people. You know, there's special situations where I just always find that I go to a store and I buy a greeting card and I'm like, all right, I want the blank one. I want to write what I want to write in it. You know, and then I want to do something that is special, because I think we live in a time, right, where we don't write things to people like we used to anymore. It's text, it's email, and that's all fine. But there's something beautiful about using your hands and doing something, and people go like, oh wow, that was so, I don't know the last time you got a handwritten thank you note, Jackie, but I got one recently and I was like, this is awesome. I just, I love that. I'm going to show you something else here too that could certainly be done. And let's flip, I'm going to get rid of that piece of paper and I'm going to flip you back down here. This is also something too that you could certainly use in, you know, fine art application, but you could also use in a somewhat crafty application, and that's masking fluid. So what I've done here, and let's actually take this sheet that I have here. I put down some masking fluid and I put color over here, and this will peel off nicely. Now, if I was peeling this off, you know, if I was working on a project, I'd make sure maybe I have something, you know, my hands have paint all over them. Gosh knows what else they have on them now from grabbing the pastel, right? But I would make sure that my fingers are clean, or I'd use like a little pickup eraser.
Right.
But what you could do if you're working with acrylics, just like with watercolor, if you're working with acrylics and you want to mask off a certain area, I don't know, maybe it's that little kind of bit of the eye that just gleams, right? Maybe it's maybe you're doing something, painting something that has a porch in it and it's got those, you know, the railings or something like that, and you want to make sure those stand out as white. You can do that, and these will easily peel off. Over here I have some on the surface, and so what I could do, I'm just going to do the same thing I did here. I'm going to take a little bit of acrylic ink. I'm just going to kind of put that down. And what I would do, let's say I need a brush here. I could spread that over. And of course I could let that dry, and then we could do the same thing. We could peel, but it can be kind of a beautiful thing also, once again, for something like a greeting card.
Yes.
You know, this could be, you know, this could be kind of a, you know, this was very random and everything, but these came about because my daughter, when they were in high school, wrote some poetry for this writing class, and then they had to design a cover. All the students had to design a cover, and my daughter's always been fascinated with space, so it was a lot of poems related to the universe and such. And she was at sort of an impasse, like, what do I do for this image? I'm not sure. And I was like, why don't we just start spritzing around with some masking fluid and flicking it with the end of the brush? Why don't we do that? And then once it dries, why don't you let colors bleed into one another? And those, those start to look like things you might see at the James
Mhm.
Webb Telescope of deep space. Here's one caution, though, Jackie, that
Yes.
if we're using, well, that's the clear gesso. Let me get the correct thing. So the masking fluid is in our effects category. So
Mhm.
it's the silver. So if we had this, now I would, if I was going to do this, I wouldn't put it directly on the surface. I'd put it in some sort of container, but let's just say I put it here. This is latex based. So if I go to use my brush, and let me grab another brush that's clean. If I go to use my brush and I dip it in here and make my marks, um, this is an old brush I don't care about all that much, but still, it's got a lot of life in it. It could get gummed up with the latex base that's in there. So what I might do, and I know this is hard for everybody to see, but you can kind of see it when I do that. This is just some dish soap. So I'm just kind of coating the edge of that. Now, I wouldn't want dish soap in my paint, but since this is getting peeled off, it doesn't matter. So I'm just taking the excess off of there. And it's sort of acting like a barrier. So then I can make my marks over here and, however I want to do that. And then my water is all kind of gunked up from that red, but I can do this and the latex isn't sticking because it's coming off with the soap on there. So just a little liquid dish soap can be kind of a funky little trick there that that helps you from clogging up the brush when you're doing something like this.
That doesn't affect any colors or anything else if you're using a little bit of dish soap?
No, because when we're doing this, this is all drying
Okay.
anyway. Yeah, and we're peeling that off. So imagine even if, again, I wouldn't want the dish soap to get in my color
Right.
itself, but this is just the surface that's drying. So it's any little bit that's on there is just kind of coming off with our latex when we peel it off. So it's not that big of a deal at all. But yeah, it's a good question.
I like that.
Yeah, that can be kind of fun. Let me think here because I know we're up against the clock and I want to show a few other things here.
Sure.
There's so much here. This is ceramic stucco. So ceramic stucco really has exactly what it's called, a stucco-like quality to it. So very much like a stucco wall. Very, very, very gritty. It can be very thick as well. It's got aggregates that, again, you can paint over top of this. So if we put out a little bit of, let's put some acrylic gouache out here. We'll put some of that out just up top there. I'm going to grab that. I could, paint on top of there. And depending on what I do, I could mix the color in with it. That's what I did over here with a phthalo blue. But if I kind of go a little bit dry brush, I'm going to take color off of here. I'm just going to, right, I can just kind of hit the high surfaces there too. Or if I wanted, I could do this and then drag over top and really get a very dry brush kind of gritty feel to that. So people who really want to explore texture a whole lot, and I know at the top of the this talk today you mentioned one of the artists in my program, Alice, who's going to be doing a whole bit on specifically on textures. So
Yes.
that can be great. Natural sand has the feeling of just that. Again, these are kind of self-explanatory. Natural sand has that kind of gritty feel. Nowhere near as much as the ceramic stucco, but very much still a gritty surface to it. So it's not going to be as dead matte as that, but it's going to give you that beautiful gritty sheen. And somebody might say, they might say, well, couldn't I just add sand into a gel media? You totally could do that. My only thing about that, and I encourage people to just play and experiment. I think that is the biggest thing we need to do, not just as artists. We need to play. I don't know. When my kids were little, I don't want them to ever lose the idea of just being goofy and playing. Just right. It's such a beautiful quality that little kids have, and then we get to be grown-up boring adults who are like, no, don't do that. And I think art allows us to kind of play a little bit, and hopefully that seeps into everybody else's lives when they do things like this. But you play with these kind of mediums and things like that, and I think what you're doing is, again, you're picking a color range that makes sense most for what you do. So that's the thing. I want people to take this away and say, what do I admire like, who do I admire? If you're just trying to use acrylics, what do you see out there that you're trying to do? And you might say like, oh, I just love this thick, juicy, and I'll show you this impasto brush marks. I get excited about this stuff, Jackie. This is a painting right here of mine that's sort of, I mean, it's landscape based, but it's sort of semi-abstract in that I was out for a walk in the morning, and the sun was kind of coming up over here, but this street has trees that just kind of envelop this whole area, and you're in shadow. And then there were things going back with buildings back here that were doing things. I really upped the saturation level, but you can see here where I'm dragging with gel mediums, I'm dragging that across the surface to build those kind of thick textures and layers. And then here's one, that one, by the way, was on a panel. This is on watercolor paper.
Wow.
So yeah, so what I did is I gessoed the surface. Again, I taped it off, gessoed the surface, and then I used gel mediums to, again, come in here, and you can see I'm getting really, yeah, really quite thick, especially if we, yeah, that's good. And the raking light, yeah,
Yeah.
you get this idea of this this landscape. So it's a lovely little creek I like to paddle down on my kayak. And then this one, this is kind of where we were talking about collage before.
Yeah.
Now this doesn't look like there's any collage element in it, and I didn't mean it to look this way. This is my neighbor's house, so it's just outside my studio that way. They were the sole owners of that until they passed away a few years ago. Now there's new owners in. But before they moved out, I was able to get in the house because it was being kind of renovated, and I was able to peel wallpaper off of it. And I don't know if it'll show here. There's a little edge that you can see right there where I collaged pieces in there. And the thing about it is I didn't do that because I wanted the wallpaper to show. They were just a really neat couple who were always so kind to me and my family and kids. And I just wanted to kind of bury this little hidden gem in
Yeah.
this. I know it's there. It's like
Yeah.
those things, right, that we connect with. And it's like, it's not for anybody else per se. It's just, they were so cool. I love them so much. And they were just neat people. So I was able to collage on the surface. This, by the way, was a canvas. And I was able to collage some bits on the surface down there and then build in there. And then let's just flip back down here one more time. And again, be able to kind of work in with a palette knife and get these thicker chunks of, let's get that in focus, thicker chunks of paint that are in there. I'm not going too heavy with the gel mediums there. But if anybody's seen my work, you know, they know that I lean more towards the kind of thicker application of color. So the gel mediums are good for that. I can tell you this, Jackie, I know we're up against the clock, and I want to see if we have another question or two. I'm just looking around at this massive mess that is my workspace, and some of the things we did not get to, like silver and gold metallic mediums, which are quite lovely. So maybe we'll do a part two at some, because it's just a huge topic. But the takeaway I want for everybody is that you can experiment with these things. Again, you don't have to, with that exception that Jackie asked everybody early on about, like, ratios of things. The only exception is additives. So there's just like 2 or 3 little additives we have in the range, and those are sort of concentrated formulas. So there's specific instructions on there to how you want to mix those with colors. But otherwise, you can kind of go crazy. And the suggestion that I always have for people, if you're watching this and you have a friend group and you're all kind of endeavoring to have fun with art, you know, together, then each buy like a smaller jar and then split it up into other, or just get together and use it. That to me is one of the best ways to get a feel for things. Also, Jackie mentioned a kind of tabletop thing in store. That's a fantastic way, because I can show you all this and you can go, oh, that's cool with the stencil. Oh, really neat with the clear gesso. But it's nice if you can get in the store and like feel it. You know, right, Jackie? It's the difference between, again, I always say this, but it's like, hey, this food is really awesome, Jackie, but I'm not going to let you taste it. And you'd be like, Well, you're cruel. So in store, it's the opportunity to come into Gwartzman's, and then you can actually touch this stuff and you can feel it, and the artist can let you spread a little out, and you can go like, oh, I get it. I get it. Yeah. So I know we got 1 minute. Any question there in our final minute, Jackie?
I think you've dazzled everyone as always, Jimmy. I don't see any questions coming in. I'm sure they'll pop up later. But I was going to mention again for those of you that joined us, and I want to thank Jimmy very much. Jimmy Leslie, I always say, is a wealth of information. I always learn something new. I hope everyone did. For those of you that just joined, my name is Jackie G, and I'm with Gwartzman's Art Supplies in Toronto. We do have we will have a Zoom demo with Alice with Liquitex products, and that is going to be again on February the 27th. That is also at noon. So if you want to join in then, she'll be showing exactly how things work and really getting in depth. Oh, we have a hello from the Netherlands. So hello to the Netherlands. And of course, anyone who is joining us across Canada and North America. We do also March the 1st, which is a Saturday, Gwartzman's Art Supplies. We're going to have a tabletop so you can come in and play with the mediums. We'll have a really great selection. And of course, if you want to try out some of the things that Jimmy talked about, we'll try and indulge you and let you test out color with medium, and we can go from there. Again, thank you, Jimmy. We should do part 2, 3, 4, 5, and
Yes.
6. We always say that. And I'm sure we'll talk about it again. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Jimmy.
My
And I'm
pleasure.
sure we'll talk again soon.
Cheers, everybody. Thank
Bye-bye,
you, Jackie.
everyone. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Cheers.